Before Resident Evil Requiem, I had only really played 3 Resident Evil games in the past. I played the original Resident Evil Revelations on the 3DS, and its sequel, Revelations 2, on the Switch, and most recently I played Resident Evil 4 on the Wii. And while I really liked all of those games, I didn't necessarily think myself as a fan of the Resident Evil series. But when I saw the first trailer for Resident Evil Requiem on the Switch 2 during that partner showcase last year, I was immediately interested. It looked really cool, and just the fact that it was coming to Switch 2 made it pretty much a guarantee that I was going to get it at some point. And I could not be more glad that I did, because this game is absolutely fantastic. So let's talk about it. We should probably start with what the game actually plays like, because it's a very interesting take for the Resident Evil series. We have 2 playable characters here, Grace Ashcroft and Leon Kennedy, the latter of which is a landmark character in the series, has been in other games, including the Resident Evil 4 I just mentioned. And while multiple playable characters are nothing new for the Resident Evil series, Revelations had that a lot, it is very interesting the way it's done in Requiem, because it's actually very different playing as either character. It's not the same experience at all. When you're playing as Grace, the gameplay is more focused on horror, and it takes place in first-person view by default. Grace's gameplay is a lot more about stealth, so you want to be quiet and try to time your moves so that your enemies don't spot you and cause serious problems. Grace isn't a completely defenseless character. You do have weapons you can use, but she has way fewer attack options compared to Leon. And on the other hand, Leon is way more focused on action, and his gameplay takes place in third-person perspective by default. So Leon has way more weapons that you can choose from, and he usually encounters a lot more enemies because you're not really supposed to avoid them, you're just supposed to mow them down with all the weapons that Leon has. So there are very different gameplay perspectives here already, but that's not where the differences stop. Item management and upgrades are also very different between Leon and Grace. So with Grace, item management is a lot more similar to something like Resident Evil 7, where you have very limited space to store your items and to carry them with you, but you do have the option to deposit items at a deposit box that you can find throughout the environment. So it is a little more cautious. You have to plan ahead what you want to carry with you at any given time. With Leon, item management is very different. It's actually a much wider area and you have a lot more space for your items. And it kind of works like Resident Evil 4, where you can organize your storage space and even rotate items to try and maximize the available space so you can fit more things. And unlike Grace, you can't technically deposit items in a deposit box, though you can sell them for credits and you can use those credits to buy upgrades for your equipment. So there's a very different dynamic with just about everything with these characters, not just the way they play when you're actually moving through the scenery, but just the way items work, the way upgrades work. Everything is planned a little bit different with these 2 characters, so it is a very interesting combination. These are 2 different games in one, but they still come together really well. They still feel like they're part of the same game, but they're very different experiences. And that kind of helps keep the game very fresh as you play it, so that really helps. It's very, very good. I will say I would have liked to see a little bit more of Grace, especially in the second major portion of the game. So the game is sectioned in a way that where the first portion is very focused on Grace, but Leon still gets a little bit of a spotlight. There are some segments where you play as Leon. But then the second major portion, you're playing mostly as Leon, and really you're playing only as Leon, because Grace never really appears here. And story-wise, it makes sense why it is that way, but it did feel for a while like there was just a lot of Leon gameplay, crammed together. I kind of wish there was a little bit more Grace sprinkled in that section. Which is not to say that Leon gameplay is worse or anything like that, it's just I really like that dichotomy of going from one gameplay style to the other, and so it just became a little more, consistent in a way that just makes it a little bit less interesting, if that makes sense. But no matter who you're playing as, the game is always really, really fun and really exciting. When you're playing as Grace, of course, there's a little bit more tension because, again, you don't have a lot of attack options, so you're just always afraid of being caught or you're just trying to get out of this dangerous situation. And that really creates this huge sense of relief every time you manage to get through something that is really stressful. You don't know how to get through this enemy, you don't know if they're gonna spot you. And it's It's always very rewarding every time you manage to make a little bit of progress. It's great. And on the other hand, Leon is just fun for a different reason. You know, you get to mow down all these enemies, you have way more attack options, you can just defeat a lot of enemies. That feels really satisfying, you know, you got a lot of stuff coming at you. And it's not like it's easier because you have more attack options, because obviously the game balances that with having more and stronger enemies that are way harder to defeat. So there's still a tension and fear of sorts that you get when you're playing as Leon. It's a little less overwhelming, but it still keeps you on your toes. So there's this constant sense of like tension. You're never fully in the clear, but that really creates this continuous sensation of like, you know, pressure and release. That idea that, you know, when you're put under stress, it feels way more relieving to then be freed of it. And that's something that is core to just games in general. And it's done super well in Resident Evil Requiem. Like there's this constant sensation of, you know, pressure and then releasing, and it's very, very satisfying. I also really like the characters as people, and I think Grace in particular is just a very, very good addition to this game. She's just a very nervous character, a very nervous person. She has these very like nervous, shaky movements. She's shy and stuff. And she's clearly terrified to be caught up in all of whatever's going on here. But she doesn't stand down, you know, she's scared, she's shaking, she doesn't know how, she sometimes doesn't even really know how to talk to people, but she is pulling through, she's not backing down. This is what she's supposed to do and she's going to do it. And she's actually really tough. It's just, you know, she's nervous and scared, but she pulls through, and I think that's really endearing in a way. And it's also easy to see why she is that way, at least in part, because she has a really tragic backstory that's like traumatizing and at the same time strengthens her and gives her motivation to do things. Like I think she's just a really well-developed character. Like she makes a ton of sense here, and I just really liked seeing her on screen. But I really like Leon too. Like, I understand he has a lot of backstory that I'm not really aware of because he's been in multiple Resident Evil games in the past, and I haven't really seen him in all of them. But I like him here a lot. Like, he's an older version of him, and he's just here. He just wants to do the right thing after things that have happened, you know, in previous games. Like, it all plays into who he is in this game. And again, I'm not fully aware of all of that context, but it definitely feels like a very mature character that has had a lot of experience with what's happened here, and that makes him stronger, of course, but he also has like a big emotional investment in what's happening. So I think both of these characters are very interesting in this game. But of course, I'm a Nintendo fan, and I've played this game on the Switch too, so I think it's worth talking about how it runs on the Switch too, because obviously this console is not as powerful as the PlayStation 5, and even less so the PlayStation 5 Pro or a high-end PC. So how does this, you know, very modern current generation game translate to the Switch 2? And honestly, it's really impressive. And before I get into any of like the details and the downsides, like, I think it needs to be said that this game, the fact that the game with this level of detail and everything going on in this world, a game that looks this good, the fact that it can run on a tablet that's smaller than an iPad, like this thing is tiny, like it still has a screen and a battery and stuff, and like once you remove the controllers, it's a tiny thing, and it can produce a game that looks this good. Like, I think just acknowledging that is crazy, because it looks really, really good when you consider the kind of device that this is running on, and the fact that it actually targets running at 60 frames per second. You know, it usually holds it, like, not always, we'll get to that, but the fact that it tries to run and look as good as it does while running at 60 frames per second, it's just so impressive. Like, it's crazy. But yes, of course there are problems, and as I just alluded to, while the game does target and usually hold 60 frames per second, it does drop, and those drops are very noticeable. Like, it can drop quite a bit, and you can definitely tell that it's not running at 60 frames per second sometimes. So it's not subtle, it's not like something that you'll miss. I think it's very noticeable, but I also don't think it's like gameplay breaking or anything like that. I don't think it ruins the experience. Again, you have to consider the context of this running on a freaking 8-inch tablet. And yeah, like it is noticeable, but it's okay. Like, it's still like above 30 when those drops happen usually. So like it's still fine, you can tell for sure. And another consequence, of course, of running on such a small, low-power device compared to the big consoles and PCs is that this game actually renders at a very low internal resolution of 540p, and then it uses upscale, DLSS upscaling to go up to 1080p. That's findings from Digital Foundry. And I mean, for the most part, it actually looks really good. Again, they've done comparisons over on Digital Foundry. They compared the Switch 2 version to like the Xbox Series S, which is, it's an underpowered version of the Xbox, but it's still a home console that uses a lot more power. And the Switch 2 version actually looks a lot better than the Xbox Series S, like way better. But, it's still upscaling a very low resolution to a higher resolution. And there's situations where that's very noticeable, specifically with hair. When you look at characters' hair like Grace or even Leon, when you see it in certain situations, you'll see like individual strands of hair. And it doesn't look very good with all the upscaling. Like you'll see like some artifacting around the hair. That happens sometimes. I don't think it's a huge deal, but it is, again, it's noticeable if you're looking at the screen, which obviously you're going to be. And it's also actually, I think it's at its worst, like near the beginning of the game, there's this section where you're shining a light on all these metallic surfaces in the kitchen. And like, the little highlights of the reflections, with the upscaling, they look a little weird. Like there's like a sort of almost shimmering effect, I guess, sometimes. I don't think that's exactly what you would call that, but it is noticeable. There's like some weird stuff with the way the light is reflected in that specific situation. I would say that's probably the worst the game looks in that regard. But again, like it's just impressive that this runs at all and it still manages to look as good as it does for as long as it does. Like there are a couple of parts of the game where there's a little bit of a problem with little things, but the game looks great, and like there's really not much to complain about if you're just playing the game. And you're, in exchange for that little sacrifice in performance, okay. And in exchange for that little sacrifice in performance, you get to play this game on the go if you want to. And that's actually something I haven't been able to do. My Joy-Con is out for repair, so I can only use the Pro Controller. So I haven't been able to play in handheld mode. I know that in handheld mode the graphics are even worse because the render resolution is lower, and that makes sense. But again, this is like when you look at handheld mode, you're looking at an 8-inch screen, so the difference in quality is going to be way less noticeable. Like I played this on a 65-inch 4K TV, so like if the game looks fine there, even with the downgrades that come with handheld mode, I think it'll look fine on a tiny 8-inch screen. And then also, at least the handheld screen supports variable refresh rate, so when you get those frame drops that make things run a little bit slower, you actually might not notice it as much because of the variable refresh rate, making things look a lot smoother. So I think the experience on handheld mode, just kind of a hazard, I'm hazarding a guess here, but I think it'll probably be fine. If it runs this well on the TV, I think the handheld portion will be fine too. But yeah, I think that kind of covers the general thoughts that I have on Resident Evil Requiem without getting into like spoiler territory. This is a fantastic game. Like, at least a 9 out of 10. Even on the Switch 2, I would say this is at least a 9 out of 10. It is so good, it's so impressive that it manages to run the way that it does on the Switch 2. Like, it's great. It's just such a good experience. The only thing I'll say is that I kind of wouldn't mind if the game was a little bit longer. It took me about 15 hours, a little under 15 hours to finish the game myself. And that took probably that includes probably close to an hour that I spent running around in circles in this specific location, because I knew there was a secret I was missing and I couldn't find it, and I still couldn't find it by the end, so that's on me. But that took forever. That one part took me forever, and it's entirely my fault. But yeah, about 15 hours to get to the end, with a decent amount of collectibles, I would say. It's not a short game, it's just I wish I could have, I kind of would have liked to see more of it. Like, I was having so much fun with it that I definitely wouldn't have minded playing it for a little bit longer. But I think that's probably the desirable outcome. I think that's definitely better than the opposite, which is a game overstaying its welcome. I think a game that leaves you wanting a little bit more is preferable than having a game that just kind of feels like it's dragging on towards the end. So I'm very happy with the outcome here for how I feel about this game. But yeah, that's about it. Play Resident Evil Requiem, it's awesome. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Oh, also, before you go, if you like Resident Evil, I'm actually streaming Resident Evil 7 on my channel currently. If you're watching this on Saturday, I'll be streaming tonight, and I'll probably continue streaming it every Saturday for the next few weeks. So I hope to see you there. Bye.